Today in American culture, Japan and Japanese culture have made their way into the daily lives of young Americans. What comes to mind for me is media, especially Japanese styled anime shows and movies called anime. Some Japanese practices and entertainment, like anime, have become so common that even the average American teenager can name one or more shows made in Japan. Before doing my research, I knew how popular Japanese culture was in America. What I didn't know was how rich and vast Japanese culture was. And by the end of my research, I finally began to understand why some Americans are so obsessed with learning more about Japan and their culture. So earlier in the semester, I made a brochure that kind of went around that kind of involved what I was researching and what I kind of learned about Japanese culture. I put it into different categories, which were things like Japan and Japanese culture, geography, cultural values, kind of how the cultural changes have changed, how the culture has changed recently, food and drinks, and then I showed some cool nature and attractions that I thought was very interesting when I was researching. So I'm just going to read over the first page of the brochure that I had on Japan and Japanese culture. I learned that the first settlers of the island came from China about 35,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age. I also learned that they have a heavy emphasis on their cultural values, and they're very traditional. Recently, that's kind of changed, and which I get into a little bit later. But their values are passed on from generation to generation. Geography. I had Japan is a group of islands off the northeastern coast of China in the Pacific Ocean. They have 4 cities with a population over 2 million, which I thought they have a high population for how small the island is. And everyone knows about these pictured here, the temples. And I found out that they are very old. Some are over 1,000 years old, and I thought that was very interesting. And for their traditional cultural values, which again they're passed on from generation to generation, stuff that they value is thinking of others, doing your best, not giving up easily, respecting your elders or respecting the older generations, knowing your role and working as a group. Here, right below this, I have a picture of a traditional kimono, which is a Japanese robe worn by mostly women. They have special wedding kimonos that are really expensive, thousands of dollars. They have men, women, and children kimonos as well. It's not just for women, of course. Here on the next page, I kind of talked about how the culture's changed a little bit. I wrote here, one way traditional culture has changed in the 21st century can be seen in the music industry, which I found very interesting. They now have a lot of people listen to a lot of different genres, and whereas in the past they didn't, and they only kind of listened to more a not as wide of a array of music as they do now. And I also noted that their culture has changed in how they dress, and I know here in America we also have taken a lot from their fashion. Japanese streetwear is very popular nowadays, and a lot of trends start over there and make their way over to here or to other first world countries. And next I have here is food and drinks. Another cool thing that you see a lot in America is our takes on Japanese food and drink. Stuff like matcha that they drink every day. It reminded me of the British, how they drink tea every day. It's very common in Japan for people to drink tea multiple times a day. I had here, other foods include sushi, which is very popular here, sashimi, gozu, and a bunch of other. They have a lot of fish and meats. And lastly, I just included some cool stuff that I found while researching that I didn't know. They had a Disney resort, their own Disney resort. I believe we have two here in America, and I know they have one maybe in England and one in Spain. Not for sure, but I thought that was very interesting, and it looks really nice. It looks like pretty cool. Also, another thing that I didn't mention throughout my whole paper is the inclusion of video games. Video games has been very popular, that have come from Japan, Nintendo being one of the most popular, and they even have a Nintendo World in Kyoto. So I found that very interesting. And one of the cooler natural things that I found was Mount Fuji, which I think a lot of people know, but it's just cool to see, especially just a picture of here that I have here. I think it looks really nice. So kind of in conclusion, I after researching, I kind of have a better understanding of Japan and Japanese culture. Even though I still think I've only scratched the surface of its history, I think I definitely widened my knowledge greatly on it. And finally, I think if anyone is interested in a particular country or culture, I would encourage them to take the time and learn more about it, maybe learn some of the history and culture, maybe in language if they can. And yeah, thank you for listening.